The fact that we're in a period of economic trauma probably is a good sign that we need to start thinking much more systemically about what we're going to do differently. My guess is that the economy we're moving towards looks less to growth than to durability and resilience and security, that it's probably going to be far more, that the trajectory will be more in the direction of local instead of the ever-expanding outward globalism that's relied on an endless supply of cheap fossil energy to make it possible. I think we're in one of those really interesting moments that has a lot of promise, and the only real worry is that climate change is happening so fast that it may knock the props out from under the whole thing before we can get where we need to go. Just to give you the easiest example, the place you can see this new economy emerging is in food, and it's been wonderful to watch. As the local food movement has grown and the number of farmers markets has doubled and then doubled, that's the fastest growing part of our food economy. Fast enough that last year the USDA said there were actually more farms in America instead of fewer for the first time in 150 years, okay? Which is great. The problem is that the thing that will, I mean, I live in Vermont, which is at one of the headquarters, along with the Bay Area, of this sort of local food movement. When we had Hurricane Irene dump more rain on Vermont than ever has fallen there, a direct consequence of the fact that the warm air holds more water vapor than cold. When that happened at the end of August, it wiped out every farmer in the state. There's nothing growing there now. I mean, everything was flooded and submerged, our best local farms underwater. We've got to take on these environmental challenges to have any hope of being able to do the kind of really interesting, transformative economic work that's possible now.
But what do we really need to change? And what we need to change is the system. And the system cannot change until there's a manifest crisis that is shared and the pain is shared. And that's just the way human beings are. I'm not wishing it upon us. And whether it's a climatic crisis, like 2 force 5 hurricanes climbing up the East Coast in the same year, that certainly make an impression, or whether it's economic or whether it's both, because they're not unrelated. I don't know what it'll be, but in the meantime, what I see happening and why I wrote Blessed and what I see Bill doing with P50.org is that it's extraordinarily important for people to sort of build in or to create, it's not more than resiliency, it's what's going to succeed in a sense, an ecological sense, the system that's in place right now. And so it may look marginal, the small farm may look inconsequential, but as I said, there's no such thing as inconsequential action. There's only consequential inaction. This is a pattern that you will see if climate change is happening, and that pattern is absolutely happening. In fact, it's happening in an accelerating way, much quicker than any scientist had predicted. Even the most radical or most of science are now taken aback by the rate of change that we're seeing.
When the forest fires in Texas were at their height in late summer, the head of the Texas Forest Fire Service said, "No one has ever tried to fight forest fires in conditions like these in human history." And he was right, with the exception of what happened in Australia a couple of years before. There'd never been recorded sort of humidities that low, temperatures that high, wind speeds like that. I find when I'm around the country talking to mayors and things like that around the world, yeah, you can often get mayors and things interested. The people that have no problem at all understanding exactly what you're talking about are the people who run public works departments in cities around the world. And it's because the old book said you put in a 6-inch culvert and that's going to handle any storm except for the 1 in 500-year storm. And wherever they can, they're ripping out the 6-inch culverts and putting in 10-inch ones because they're, year after the 500-year storm coming every 6 months and just cannot deal with it. I think that we've got 2 tasks now as a society. The interesting and powerful, fun one that takes all our creativity is to figure out how to build these beautiful, resilient, interesting local and regional economies that can roll with the punches, that that's really where I wish I could spend all my time. That's what I mostly write about, and Vermont, where I live, is a place like California that's a leader in it, and nothing I'd rather do. I was home 50 days last year, I think, because the second part of this task, the emergency part, is making sure that we don't push the system so hard that that can't happen. So far, we've raised the temperature of the planet 1 degree, but the climatologists are quite robust in their consensus that that will be 4 degrees by century's end, unless we get our act together very, very fast. You can't adapt to change at that level. So we've got to, we have got to adapt to that which we can no longer prevent, but even more importantly probably is to prevent that which there is just no way for us to adapt to. We're already pushing the outer limits. I mean, we've moved out of the Holocene, the 10,000 years of benign climatic stability that underwrote the rise of human civilization, and we're into something else. And the question is, how deep into that something else are we going to go? And if you think it's hard for us to adapt to those things in a place like California that has plenty of money, I mean, one of the pleasures of helping start 350.org is that we work in every country in the world except North Korea. So I've been everywhere. And, this is already a matter of life and death, and all too often death, for people in place after place after place around the world. And of course, the horrible ethical irony of that is the places that are hit hardest are the places that have done the least to cause the damage. We don't just have a practical onus on us to do something, we have a profound moral one too. Most people understand that climate change is an incredibly serious problem about which we need to do something. I'm not worried about average people being willing to step up. Our problem is far and away caused by the fact that the fossil fuel industry, which is the most profitable industry on Earth, has all the political, all the financial means at their disposal to keep us from taking action, and clearly they're willing to use it. They are willing to keep going the record profits they're making for another 5 or 10 years, even if it means the ruination of the planet. And that's why we're now, there's nothing polite about the political fights that we're now in. If we cannot break the power of the fossil fuel industry to delay change and action, then we can't do anything. And that's the work that we're about. And that's why people are going to jail, and that's why people are doing huge things, 350, we've had these great, enormous global days of action in every country on Earth. It's why people are stepping up. And that's what the battle is, people versus very concentrated pockets of money.
Let's talk about that civil disobedience. You were in front of the White House in August. About 1,200 people were arrested. I believe you say that was the largest environmental action.
People say it was the largest civil disobedience protest in this country since the 1980s, and since we did it every day for 2 weeks, sort of the most sustained of its kind since the civil rights movement. And what was interesting about it, and about this whole tar sands fight that's been underway, with many, many, many groups involved, including great groups from California like the Rainforest Action Network and the Sierra Club. What was interesting about it wasn't the usual suspects who were out there getting arrested. We asked everybody when they signed up, we didn't ask them how old they were, because that would be rude to ask. We asked, who was president when you were born? And the biggest cohort came from the FDR and Truman years. The last day of this thing, we had a guy arrested with a little sign around his neck that said, "Handle with care, World War II vet." He'd been born in the Harding administration. Everybody who got arrested was in a coat and tie or a dress, And the reason was to kind of demonstrate to the rest of the world who the radicals in this scenario are. Radicals, the people who work at Chevron and Shell and Exxon are radicals. They are willing to alter the chemical composition of the atmosphere in order to get money, okay? That's as radical an act as any person who ever lived has undertaken. Those of us who are trying to preserve the world in something like the form we once knew it are, in this sense, deeply conservative. And it's important to get that across, to understand what the ideologies around this fight really are. We know the thing that we have to do. Everybody who's ever looked at it knows that if you put a serious price on carbon to reflect the damage that it does to the environment, then we would begin to move much more quickly and gracefully in the right direction. The only reason we don't do that is because of the incredible power of the fossil fuel industry to prevent that from happening. And they have used, look, Exxon made more money last year than any company in the history of money. Okay? In our political system, that gives them way more power than they deserve. And they have used that power to prevent change from happening. And they're using that power right now to try and make sure, all those companies, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which the biggest contributor to elections in the last cycle was the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and they put 94% of their money into the campaigns of climate deniers. All right? They used that power to retard what scientists, economists, and everyone else knows that we need to do, and that's the shameful part.
What we need from Obama is conviction and spine and a clear vision of the future, and that is totally absent. And he has that bully pulpit anytime he wants it. And no Congress can stop him from being a human being. And no Congress can stop him from being a father of two beautiful children and saying, I am going to do everything I can to ensure that my daughters have a livable world. Nothing stops him from doing that. And that's what's missing in the Obama administration. The dysfunctional politics, that's another issue. I mean, and a real issue, and a terrible issue. But that doesn't prevent him from standing up.
And there are issues on which the Congress doesn't get in the way. That's one reason that we focus so hard on this Keystone Pipeline. Congress has not a thing to do with it. The president will either sign or not sign something called a Presidential Certificate of National Interest. And if he doesn't sign it, then they cannot build this pipeline. His call, he's a basketball guy. It's a 20-foot open jump shot from the top of the key, and he'll either take it or pass off, And we're doing our best to help him sort of nerve up to do it. They've done a couple of good things. We've got better mileage standards than we used to, and there was some money in the original stimulus bill for green things. Not anywhere near as much money as, say, the Chinese put into their similar stimulus bill. They've done a lot of bad things on their own. Earlier this year, they opened up 750 million tons of coal underneath Wyoming for mining. And it wasn't something Congress made them do. Ken Salazar and the president decided to do it. And that's the equivalent of opening 300 new coal-fired power plants. We can't afford to be doing this any longer. Everything we know about the science of climate change says we've got to keep carbon in the ground. And if we can't do that, then we really can't deal with it.
And I think the same thing holds true in terms of renewable energy. And I think that in some ways the progressive movement has given a hall pass to some renewable technologies that are not renewable, and solar is one of them. And it's not renewable because you're using high intensity, in this case Chinese coal powered plants to make a low intensity generator that can't turn around and make itself. And so therefore it's not renewable. And second, it is the most toxic form of energy on the planet besides the tar sands per kilowatt hour, save a meltdown in Fukushima. And so
that's because the photovoltaic cells and what goes into them, as well as
it's a witch's brew, and you have hydrofluoride gases that are 25,000 times more powerful than CO2, and they're escaping from the sintering ovens in China. And a quarter ounce escapes, and you have a net positive effect on the environment in terms of carbon, not negative. So I'm just saying is that this is an incumbent technology that was drafted from the space program that we're still trying to optimize. And I think that there is another generation of technologies coming that are very different and that do not have this sort of, it's really kind of Promethean technology, which is we're going to beat these molecules into shape. We can use the heavy metals and rare earths and hydrochloric acid and silane gases and all this sort of stuff. We're going to mix all this up and present you with something you think is renewable. And I'm saying, time out. There's no point in making a renewable energy generator that has a 3 to 5 to 1 return on energy. That energy return on energy invested is laughable. It's what the tar sands have. It's 2 to 3 to 1. And we came from a 100 to 1 world. That is the oil and coal world. For every unit of energy we put into the earth, 100 units came back, and that's what we're accustomed to and used to. And get it or not, the fact is that surplus energy is the feedstock of civilization. And when you do not have surplus energy, you do not have civilization. You have a hardscrabble existence. So we've got to be thinking about renewable technologies that have a really magnificent return on the energy invested, not a paltry one. So for all these reasons, all I'm saying is that incumbent solar, thank you for getting us to where we are, but it's not going to take us to where we want to go.
While you're waiting for that, two things to do. One is to use the other kind of solar energy, solar thermal. Heat your hot water. It's a complete no-brainer. 250 million Chinese, when they take a shower, the hot water's coming off the roof. It's under 1% in this country. It makes complete sense, and the energy returns are great. And the other kind of energy is human and political energy that we have to muster, and we're beginning to do it. Look, September 24th, this huge day of action at 350 called Moving Planet, and was all about transportation all over the world. And the key thing that people were doing every place in the country, including right here in San Francisco, was all about bicycles, okay? Because A, they're a part of the solution that we need, and B, they're beautiful and fun, and C, they're one of the very few technologies that both rich people and poor people in this world use. And we need a lot more technologies like that are about human solidarity. We need to be doing a really good job of trying to remove the glamour attached to, say, automobiles and stick it onto things like bicycles that make far more sense for far more people in far more places. Well, there's got to be, sooner or later, a global agreement of some kind. I mean, I don't think there's any other. This is the first global problem that we've ever had. If we can't get, and we're not going to get America and China and the other big problems to agree without some serious pressure from the other countries of the world. I mean, everybody's going for the next sort of international negotiations to Durban this fall. And hopefully one of the things that will be happening there is the entire continent of Africa, which the top half of which is locked in a devastating drought right now, will be putting serious pressure on the world. We've got to, that's one of the things we do at 350.org, is try to mobilize the whole planet. And most of the people on that planet use so little carbon that they don't have any effective way in their own personal lives to change the outcome. But politically, they can put a lot of pressure on those of us who should be changing things. Copenhagen, the movie did not end the way that it was supposed to end. I mean, we had 117 nations that we managed to sign on to this 350 parts per million target, right? That's good, but they were the wrong 117 nations. They were all the poor and vulnerable ones, and the rich and addicted ones, led by our country, undermined that meeting and have done nothing since. The State Department has been, even under President Obama, a complete and utter failure at getting any kind of international momentum going towards an agreement. We've got to change that, and eventually this. I mean, here's the thing about climate change. Eventually, this is going to happen. Eventually, there are going to be enough bad things that have happened that people all over the world will be saying we have no choice but to do something. Sooner or later, we'll do it. The problem is, sooner or later is the issue, because the physics and chemistry of climate change do not give us a very long window to operate, and if we choose later instead of sooner, then we might as well not really bother, frankly, because the problem will have passed a point where it's any longer susceptible to our amelioration.
if we just look at where we are right now and say, well, what would it take to achieve 450 ppm, that is the cap at 450 before drawdown in 25 years, the first thing we have to do is stop increasing our use of energy. And it's about 16 terawatts right now, 16 trillion watts per. So in order to do that, just to kind of give you, and you can do the numbers yourself and play, it's fun to do, but you would need 200 square meters of 15% solar panels every second for 25 years, and you need 50 square meters of solar thermal.
Building new ones, you're saying?
Yeah. Every
Deployment,
second for
yeah.
25 years, you would need one 3 gigawatt wind turbine every 6 hours for 25 years. You need one Olympic-sized swimming pool of biodiesel algae every second for 25 years. You need one new 100 megawatt geothermal plant every week for 25 years, and you need one 3 gigawatt nuclear power plant every week for 25 years. So
Wow.
that's a shopping list, and you can rearrange it, in any way you want, and that's with population increasing by almost 50%, not quite, but maybe 40% during that time, with many people in the world needing more energy, not less. We're a 10,000 watt society. If you divide 16 terawatts into 7 billion, you get just under 2,300 watts per person is the allocation that would be fair and just right now, and we're way over that. There's no way that we're going to make this transition without basically changing who we are as human beings. And so the cascading series of crises that we have all created, and generations before us, that are manifesting at this time, are actually a gift to humanity. And we can spurn the gift, or we can accept it. If we accept it, then we lead an extraordinary life. Because it doesn't matter what somebody says, or what's predicted, or what the odds are, because we then lead a life that's transcended in terms of its service and its giving to others. And so, for me, if I had to do all of it, this is when I want to be. In fact, I wish I could be younger right now. But I mean, this is when I want to be born, this is when I want to be alive. And I love the fact that the odds are stacked against us.
And what do you tell your kids?
That.
Most Americans understand that climate change is real. We elected a president 4 years ago who campaigned with the most beautiful rhetoric that you could imagine. He said, on the night he was nominated, said, in my presidency, the rise of the oceans will begin to slow and the planet will begin to heal. The thing that gets in the way is what I described before. It is the unlimited power of the fossil fuel industry to throw smoke in everybody's eyes. The exact same people did the exact same thing with smoking and tobacco and lung cancer for 20 years. That's how long it took to vanquish them then. Unfortunately, we don't have 20 years to do it, so that's why people are going to jail and doing what they need to do, trying to move this up. But it's not a problem with scientists have done their job, man. The scientific method has been absolutely vindicated. They took a difficult problem in physics and chemistry and arrived at a workable consensus. It's the political method that has failed as badly as the scientific one has worked, and the reason that it's failed is because it is polluted by money. And to the degree that we can fight around that, we have a chance.
I think it's important to understand that we live in a very violent culture. We say, oh yeah, of course. I mean violent every step of the way. It's not just violence in Iraq and Afghan. It's a violence to our children the way they're educated. It's a violence to women. Women know this world over. It's violent the way we treat our soils and agriculture. We're violent to our forests. Our thermo-industrial system is violent in terms of chemistry. I mean, every single aspect of what we do in this culture is violent. And what we're talking about is maybe moving to a world and a civilization that starts to look at nature as a mentor, as Janine Benyus says, that really basically imitates what we see in nature, which is life creates the conditions that are conducive to life. And you don't do that with force. You don't do it with coercion. You don't do it by power over strategies.
The United States got wealthy off fossil fuels, and is not really willing to go with the Kyoto approach or pay any kind of reparations for the climate damage that we've already done. What can we hope for in terms of an agreement? I mean, if Obama goes ahead with the pipeline, and when the petroleum price was getting too high and he opened the reserves to lower it, is there any way the United States can get up to the bully pulpit and say, hey, let's make a deal? What can we offer?
Look, at the moment, there's no possibility right now for a global deal, just like there's no possibility for anything happening in Congress right now. We're clearly not there. That's why our job is to build a political movement big enough to force our leaders to actually lead. And that's not something that has happened around climate until recently. The reason we started 350.org was because at a certain point, after sort of having written the first book about this and gotten to watch for 15 or 20 years while nothing happened, it dawned on me that the strategy of having scientists whisper in the ear of politicians about what the biggest problem in the world wasn't working, because while they were whispering in one ear, the fossil fuel industry was bellowing in the other ear about what they were going to do. And without, we're never going to have the money that the fossil fuel industry has, so we better find an alternate currency to work in. And that currency has got to be our bodies and our creativity and our spirit and our passion. That's what political movements are about. That's what we're trying to build. When we build one, as we build one, new political possibilities open up.